So we decided to chuck in our jobs and have a go ourselves. Honestly, we must have been mad, but I don't regret it. Literally resigned, went and sat on the beach for 2 weeks on a Greek island and just went, right, this is cool. What are we going to do now?
Let's take it from the top.
Gurvinder Khurana's journey in the design world has been marked by her dedication to creativity, strategic leadership and a passion for transforming spaces. Gurvinder has played a pivotal role in shaping the design landscape, particularly in the workplace sector. Her work has garnered numerous accolades at the London Design Awards, and she continues to be a respected voice in the industry, contributing regularly to journals and panels on workplace design and well-being. In this episode, Gurvinder shares the experiences and defining moments that have shaped her career and outlook, both personal and professional. Gurvinder, welcome to Places She Shapes at Abbey Road Studios. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. No, thanks for having me.
Can you take me back to you as a child, please?
It's a bumpy road. It's a bumpy road. So 70s born. That was quite a decade. But me as a child, growing up in Birmingham, Indian girl, greasy hair, plait. That's the picture. But even as a child, knew that I wanted something more. And knew quite early on that I didn't want to stay in Birmingham. You know, I was very much part of a community that my parents is first generation Indians, which was amazing because it was like having an extended family, which, you know, I think is lacking for my kids now, for example. But I was very, very fortunate, actually, now I think about it, to have been brought here and brought to the UK, because my cousins are all, you know, we're all spread out everywhere. And I was reflecting on it quite recently, actually, that I'm really glad my dad picked England to come to, even though, you know, the 80s, my sort of formative years, it was incredibly racist and incredibly sexist. Living in Birmingham, it was quite a tough gig. But that's the foundation of what you become. You know, you have a world that is telling you you're not allowed to be here and that you should go back to where you come from. I can remember a story. I would have been at infant school, and we lived in quite a sort of poor part of Birmingham, and this car slowed down and stopped. I haven't told anybody this for ages. And they called me a P word. And I said, "You've got your facts wrong. I don't come from Pakistan. I'm Indian." And I would have been about 6 years old. And I went home and I told my mum, and she went, well done. And I just thought, that's geographically incorrect. You don't know your geography, you know. And you just think, I look back now and I think, God, you know, it's just the innocence, but it was even happening at that time. I don't know whether that's what you wanted to hear, but that was my childhood, and that was where.
I think it's really important to understand that. As a teenager, how did that affect you?
So I had, you know, we moved house quite a few times. My parents actually, both my parents were very focused on making sure they could give us the best. They were quite middle class. But I found something out about my dad very, very late. I was married with, I think I'd got one child by this stage when we found out that he'd been a refugee through partition. Never told us, actually. And all of these things really, they become a part of who you are and what you experience in the world. But, you know, we had quite a tough start, but my dad was very progressive and very adamant that we integrate. And actually what you have in Birmingham a lot at the moment is or when then, you know, Indian community stayed very much as an Indian community. My dad actively positioned us so that we would mix. And that was amazing for us, actually, because it opened doors that I think we now have that a lot of people didn't get. You know, I wasn't, and I was absolutely clear, I was never going to have an arranged marriage. I was never going to toe the line. And they were really supportive of that. And actually when, again, I didn't realise I was going to say this, but when I helped other girls run away, my dad was really supportive, you know, and that was a really horrible time in the 80s when these girls were being told, right, you're getting married and this is going to be your life. And I was stashing bags and I would meet them at the top of the road and we'd get them out.
They were your friends?
Yeah. Yeah.
So how did that situation come about? How did you decide that you were going to help them?
Because I knew I was never going to settle for that for myself. And they were desperate, absolutely desperate. A couple of them were just beside themselves and didn't know how to get themselves out of it. And I said, you know, we made a plan and we got them out. And you know, I mean, I only got them as far, I mean, I was, 14, 15-ish. So only got them to the bus stop and got them on their way. But they had made a plan, they'd saved money and they got themselves out.
And they at 14 and 15? I
think we were about that age. Because the conversation started, no, it must have been 16. It must have been 16 because you wouldn't be able to. It's a bit of a blur, but I do remember having, it's been a long time. I do remember having those moments. Those stay with you forever.
Yeah.
You know. And I think that's also shaped me as a woman who I've always felt that it was, I have the ability and the gift to help other women, and I always will. That's without a doubt.
What was it about your dad that made him see that he needed to integrate you with other people?
My mum and dad both were educated, so they both had degrees, and there was a lot of Indian people that came over in the 60s and 70s that didn't. So I think having done that and then worked in India in the civil service, I think they came with a slightly different perspective.
What did they do for work when they were here?
My dad was a credit controller, so chased the money. My mum was actually qualified as a teacher, but couldn't get a job as a teacher. Again, the 70s were brutal, and so she worked in a factory, but she worked her way into an admin role quite quickly, you know. And it's really sad on reflection when you find out that, and again, you know, some of the stories about my parents came much later, when I found out that she was the first person in our family to get a degree, that her mother had said staunchly, you're not going to have an education, but her father supported her, and her father was the one that said, you need to let her study if that's what she wants to do. And my mum always in the background, I mean, my mum's formidable. And when there were moments in my teens when my grandparents said, right, that's it, she's getting married. And I went in, shut the door, and I burst into tears, and I said, and I was 17 then, and they started, and I said, this is what's happening. She's quite a quiet woman, but she went into that room and she said, it'll be over my dead body that you marry my daughter off. And I just feel, you just think, what an incredible woman, you know, because they were of the view that because they were the elders, they decided. And so
your parents had an arranged marriage?
Yeah.
But your mum said that you weren't?
Yeah. Yeah, she put her foot down on that.
Amazing.
Yeah. So
when you were a teenager, what did you aspire to be? What did you think you'd do?
I always wanted to be a designer. That's I think that's in my blood somehow, weirdly. But I was really young when I decided I wanted to do fashion. You know, I was watching Bollywood films. I loved sketching outfits, and my mum was really supportive, and she had them made for me occasionally. And a lot of people said, oh, you know, every girl wants to be a fashion designer. But that's what I really wanted to do. And I still love clothes, and I still spend far too much money on clothes, but I love it. But it was when I got onto my art foundation, I realised it wasn't for me. And I couldn't stand the people. I just want to say that. I just found the people really difficult. I just, and maybe it's the Brummie girl in me, but I'm just a little bit more, take me as you find me.
Yeah.
And, I was the girl that used to stop at the bus stop, wait for the bus to get to college, but be chatting to everybody in the queue. My dad was like, you're going to get murdered one day. You'll talk to the wrong person. And I just couldn't deal with the prima donnas. And I think that's when I realised I wanted to do that work, but I couldn't deal with the personalities. And I think it's that moment that you realise that would become your life. And I just, realised I couldn't do it. But that's what I really wanted to do.
So what happened?
I did my art foundation and I pivoted. I feel like I've pivoted a lot in my life, actually. And I thought, right, I'm not giving this up. I'm moving to London. I'm going to do something design-based. What can I do out of because you get to do a rotation of all disciplines. And the only one I could really land on was interiors. And I remember going up and saying, all right, I've decided I'm going to be an interior designer. And they were like, well, can you draw? And I was like, ish. Right. Have you ever done a perspective? No. Right. Well, that's the first thing we've got to do. We've got to teach you how to draw a perspective. I was like, oh my God, what have I done? But I did enough to get myself onto my degree. Yeah.
So did you do art at school?
Yeah. Yeah, against the odds. Again, was told very, very early on. I think I was about 7 or 8 where I was told at the school gates, you can't draw. Just give it up.
Who told you that?
My teacher. Because I remember taking a drawing and going and saying, I want to pursue art. And he said, Gurvinder, you're just not very good at it. I really don't think you should entertain that idea, or words to that effect to a 7-year-old. But that was pretty much what he said. Again, I've done a lot of tears, actually. I cried all the way home and decided I was going to do it anyway, and I did O-level art, and then I did my A-level, and I got to A-level, and you get to do 2 modules. So you get to do design and you get to do fine art and drawing. And I was rubbish at the fine art drawing. There's no, I wasn't compared to a lot of the other students, but I was good at the design, and they spotted that. And I had this fantastic, I had 2 art teachers, one which was suited and booted every day. It was very, very proper. And I had another guy who, his trousers were always a little bit round his bum. His shirt was always hanging out. He smoked rollies. His hair was like, like he'd just fallen out of the bin. But he came in and he'd always have a fag in his mouth, and he'd come over and he'd go, Gurvinder, we can do this. And then he'd wheeze at me and then take me to one side and give me extra lessons every day to get me through the exam. But it was just brilliant, because I used to think, what is this scruffy guy doing? What is this about? He always looked like he needed a bath. So, but he was my saviour, actually. He really was. Angels come in all disguises, I would say.
They do.
Yeah. Never judge anybody.
So you made that decision about interior design.
Yeah.
How are your parents feeling about that?
Yeah, my parents weren't happy at all. I think they're ecstatic now. And they came around much later. But when I made the decision that I was going to do design and I was going to move to London, first of all, my dad said, you can't move. I said, I'm going. And I filled in my own application forms and I organised everything myself, with a tiny bit of help from my mum and my brother and sister. And I left. And they did drive me down, but my dad barely spoke to me. And he really, really wasn't supportive. They didn't fight. I mean, he didn't really financially support me. That was pretty much left. A little bit of a contribution from my brother and sister, which I couldn't have done without. A tiny grant that I got, and £600 a term from the bank, who thought I was wasting my time as well. Bank manager laughed at me as well. So, yeah. So I did it, and it was a really, really tough 3.5 years because I had such little money. And actually, London's a really horrible place if you don't have very much money. And it's lonely anyway when you move down on your own. And I was quite naive. I was really naive, actually. I was quite an innocent person. I think there was a lot of pushing that I did as an Indian girl, but you're still very held within the community and you don't really see the real world for what it is. So coming to London at 21 and suddenly seeing that it's very, very different to what you've imagined it as was a bit of a shock.
Were your brother and sister in London?
My sister was, yeah. And my brother was in Slough for his sins.
And how did it make you feel that your dad didn't support you in that decision?
My dad hasn't supported a lot of my big decisions. He didn't support that. He didn't support my marriage. But he came round. It was difficult.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, he did come round and he started to see the positive, and I think it really cemented when I married Nigel, and then he came over to visit us at the flat. And Nigel had bought a shell on the corner of Bermondsey Street. Very cool place.
Very cool.
Yeah. I was like, girl's done good. And he walked in and he saw the flat and he saw what had gone from concrete bare walls to the flat that Nigel had created. And he was like, so this is what you do? And I said, yeah. I was like, well, that's actually really cool. So I think he did start to feel quite proud of what we were doing and the route we'd taken. It just took him a really long time to get it.
Yeah.
And actually, in fairness to a lot of people, the industry changed fundamentally from when I left home in 91 to when I started, 2002, 2003, the design industry was very different.
So people's perception of it, you mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh. You mentioned your dad was opposed to your marriage as well.
Yeah, because I married a white man. But again, that did change. I mean, that was an incredibly difficult time because, he'd said, I don't want you to have an arranged marriage, as long as he's Sikh or Hindu. And I tried to do it his way, actually. I really did. But most of the ones I met, thinking of a polite word, were not very good people for me. And I was always, actually, I was the daughter who laid it on the line and said, this is what's happened, which was really difficult for him to hear, that his daughter was being treated in a particular way. And and then when I went home and told them I've met somebody, but he's white and I just couldn't do it your way. And he said, yeah, but I told you those were my conditions. And I said, you might have done, but I told you what they did. And he said, well, yeah, but still. And then I just left. I did leave the house at that point. I just said, well, I'm getting married in May, in 5 months. I'd really like you to be there. He made a decision to come 2 weeks before.
Wow.
Yeah. And then he had a ball. He had a really good time and he really enjoyed it. And then at the end of it, he said to me, I'm really proud of you. And then had a few tears and hugged me. So he got past it. But I think it was difficult for him because I would have been the first one. I think, although there'd been relationships that were hidden, I suppose, for want of a better way of putting it. I was the first one to actually marry somebody outside of it, within the extended family. I was the first one to marry a non-Indian in the family, and that, which was great because it opened the floodgates for everybody. Everybody got, it was like, let's do it. Now this is my actual girlfriend. A lot of that suddenly all came out. But so I'm glad for others. I was a bit bitter and twisted for a while. It's like, it took me to do it for you lot to get an easy ride, but
Trailblazer.
But it was worth it because I haven't looked back.
How did you meet Nigel?
He was design director for Cochrane McGregor architectural practice. Don't really exist anymore. And I had been working in design and build for a little while. And I'd got to a point where in my journey I was like, right, I don't want to do design and build anymore. I want to work in consultancy because I think it's going to be better suited to me. And an agent put me forward for a job, and I found out that he was designing the first ever Jimmy Choo. And I was just like, I want a piece of this. I want this.
Their shop.
Yeah. So he knew Tamara back then. And so I found out, so I was like, I'm going for this interview. I don't care. I've got no experience in retail, but I'm going to have a go. And I didn't get the job, but I had a really good interview. And I was absolutely crushed because I couldn't think of anything more amazing than designing the shoe shop. And so I sort of sat in my ex-council flat in London Bridge and thought, what am I going to do? And I just picked up the phone and I just harassed him. It's really awful, actually, when I look back. I was just like, I'll do anything. Give me a job. Honestly. And in the end, he rang me up and he went, right, got some really boring work that needs doing. Will you do it? And I was like, all right. So I did. And I worked for him for about 6 weeks before I handed my notice in because I got offered a full-time job. I was really young still in my head and had this belief that a full-time job was better than a freelance job. And so I thought, right, I'm going to negotiate this and I'm going to see. And I said, so I've got a job offer. Will you make me permanent? And he said, no. Crushed. I was absolutely crushed. And so I took this other job. And then after that we got together because I had a rule, you don't date anybody that you work with. Okay. That was my rule back then. And so we got together after very quickly. And then I still never got to do the Jimmy Choo, but I did get a pair of boots, which I was really chuffed about. And I've still got. And
a husband.
Yes, and 2 children, actually. I forgot about them. But I got the boots. That was the most important.
It's all about the shoes. It's all about the shoes.
It is. So I then lost my job when I got back from my honeymoon. They sacked me the day I got back from my honeymoon.
This is the job that you took?
Yeah.
Okay, right.
Which is then how I...
They sacked you the day you got back from your honeymoon?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Rock and roll, I tell you.
What was the reason for...
They didn't actually give me a very good reason. They just said that they were making me redundant because my job no longer existed in a design and build practice where you need designers. I mean, I know what it was. They were chasing an account that Nigel led. They wanted that account and they saw it as a conflict. I actually bumped into one of them at a trade show. I'm going to say this on air. And he said to me, I can't believe you never took us to court. And I just thought, you bastard. You bastard. Anyway, I've not named names, but he'll know who he is.
Okay.
Yeah. And I just thought, wow, that's huge.
Okay. So you get back from honeymoon, you get made redundant.
Yeah.
Because they're chasing the account that your husband's company...
Not that they'll ever say that, but yes.
That your husband's company was chasing.
Yeah.
Who won the job?
He did. And I went and worked with him and I helped win that account further. We grew that account.
So you broke your own rule in not working with someone that you're in a relationship with?
Yeah, I massively did because then I went and worked with him and set up a business up with him. So, yeah, absolutely.
So you worked with the company that he was working for at the time?
Yeah.
Then what happened?
And then after a little while, I mean, I worked there for a couple of years and what we realised, I was still freelancing. There wasn't the offer of a job, but I was still you know, between us, we were winning account after account. And, you know, he said to me that they won't make you permanent and they won't give you a promotion. It's not going to happen for you.
Why?
It was early 2000s, right? It was a different world. It was a different world. It was an all-white, middle-aged board. And I don't fit that bill. So we decided to chuck in our jobs and have a go ourselves. So it was, honestly, we must have been mad. We really must have been mad when I think back now. But I don't regret it. It's been a journey. We worked together 19 years. We ran a business together 19 years. It's been a real journey. But we literally resigned, went and sat on the beach for 2 weeks on a Greek island and just went, right, this is cool. What are we going to do now? When we came back, we were just like...
So no plan,
nothing.
No clients?
No clients. Not a single bit of work in our pocket when we did it. We got back and we were like, we didn't really think this through, did we?
Love it. So...
He should have known better.
So how did you come up with the name? How did you form the business?
Want to know. That was terrible.
I do want to know.
The first name, which will remain nameless, we drank 2 bottles of wine and then got the dictionary and then just went, that's kind of cool. Pick that name. And nobody, for about the 5 years we had that name, nobody could even say it. We were like, but it's got a great meaning. We found it in the dictionary. It's just ridiculous. I look back, I mean, flipping idiots we were, but we had fun a little bit. I mean, it was tough.
Yeah.
And a line eventually came about because we decided after a couple of name changes that actually we should get some professionals involved who knew what they were doing. So we actually employed somebody to help us come up with the name, represent our brand and our values and drive, you know, and then we had something to really hang our hat on and drive on. But yeah, we didn't know that when we first started.
What was the brand and the values?
We're all about boutique service. It was all about service, great design and making people feel that it's a little bit like what you've done here actually with this, that when you are having that experience, that it should be an elevated experience. When you go and buy a beautiful suit or a lovely dress, you feel special. And we wanted our clients to feel that way when they were working with us, that they were heard, that they were part of the team, and that at the end of it, that they felt it was as much theirs as it was ours. That was really important to us. When we set it up back in 2003 or 4, whenever it was, through books I'd read in my 20s and 30s, there was a real passion in me, and I sort of shared this with Nigel, about emotional intelligence in business. And I had a real sense that it was distinctly lacking. And so part of our pitch was that actually you needed to design for the whole person, and that people don't just pack up their emotions into a bag and put it to one side and then go to work, that actually a human being is much more than the corporate world. And that's how we ran our business too. So that was very much about how we treated our people.
Amazing. So you built a team.
Yeah.
How did you build a team? How do you lead a team?
We led the team as collaboratively as possible. I've always felt that it was a really strong partnership, that between us, we both had a voice. And more than that, what I find in the world now, sometimes there's a real rush to get an answer. And somebody will ask you a question, and if you don't have the answer straight away, then you know what? They've moved on. And I think what we had between us and how our leadership actually informed some of what we did was that you had the space to say and think through. I think there's a real lacking of giving people time to think something through before they respond. And actually, that's how you get the better decision, and that's how you get the better result. And we did that between us and our leadership. And I have a different way of thinking and articulating to. And Nigel had patience with me, helped me grow. And then that was something that we actively did with our team. And if we had a creative opportunity come in, and I still like to do it, this is still very much the way I like to work. You sit down, you work it through together, you discuss it, you brainstorm it in a way that gives everybody a sense of equality and ownership, because it doesn't matter what you do, where you are in the pecking order. Hierarchy is actually a lot of bullshit. And you can be anywhere in that spectrum and have a brilliant idea, or give somebody else the next idea. And that was a big part of how we led. Nothing was stupid, nothing was a bad idea. Everybody had the ability to have a voice. That is still something that it's how we've raised our children, and it's how we work even now separately. For us, it was natural. That's how we are together, and that's how we brought our business team up, Yeah.
You do a lot of mentoring, and you're a real advocate for women in construction and property. Can you talk to me about that a little bit?
I'm definitely an advocate for women in construction. I think it's got a brute of a side. It's a really hard industry that quite often lacks kindness. It's a lot of testosterone. And I can kind of manage most of it because I grew up in Birmingham, and you have to have your testosterone about you growing up in the Midlands in the 80s. But I don't think it's so easy for a lot of people. And I'm not a believer in the sink or swim attitude. I'm a believer in support. And I think construction is huge for throwing people in and just seeing if they make it out alive. I don't know if I'm a mentor, I have to say. If somebody comes to me and asks my advice, I'll give it if I can. But I try not to think of myself in that way, because I think it's very easy for people to think that if you're a mentor, you've got all the answers, and we don't. We're all still learning. God knows I've been through a massive learning curve since going into corporate life.
So tell me about that.
It was, again, another pivot point, really. There was another recession with COVID. The business was surviving. We had work. But I had always said to Nigel that if we hit another recession, I wanted out. Because there's no resilience in a family-run business like that, where you are a boutique agency. And that's the price I think we paid for the commitment of our values. We were so attuned to those values that sometimes you deliver excellence, but it's sometimes at the cost of your own financial situation. And so there wasn't the resilience that we needed. So I had said, if another recession comes, I'm going to get a job. And I wasn't feeling as satisfied anymore. We'd done the business for a number of reasons, one of which was to be able to be present for our kids. Mm-hmm. And when M. Moser approached me and said, are you interested in a conversation? He said to me, look, you've always hinted at the fact that you want more. Go find out. Go find out. There's no harm in a conversation. And it went quiet, actually. It went really quiet. And, it was a very long process. And it was comical, and it was a bit spooky, because the day we went for our morning walk in COVID, and I said, it's not going to come to anything. I'm done with this. I got a phone call that literally the minute we walked back through the front door, my phone rang, and it was Charlie saying, how about that coffee? When you just think, what? Where did that come from? So I think it was clearly meant to be, but I did have an itch to scratch, and I did want to know what it was like on the other side. And I also had got to a point where the females, there was largely female team, and I had seen them grow amazingly and felt really proud. But I also felt I had more to give to more people. And I thought, well, change in a small business can only go so far. And then the reality is the bigger businesses hold the power in industry. So when you take that sort of idea, it made a lot of sense. And I needed to grow in a different way. And I also needed to work away from Nigel. We had got to a point where we'd had 2 children. We ran a business. Everything was about work or the children. There wasn't the marriage that's beginning to reestablish itself now. And that feels like it's breathed new life into us, which is really nice. Really nice. There are days where we go out. We went out for dinner recently and we said, we'll be back in a couple of hours. We were the last ones to leave the pub. And we just had a hoot. And that never happened. We would be sat, we'd talk about, it was the proverbial board meeting every time we did anything.
Yeah.
And I don't miss that.
And how did Nigel support you in making that decision?
I mean, he's been incredible, really. I think a lot of successful women are successful because they have phenomenal partners, actually, and a phenomenal network. Because he also knew that I wouldn't be satisfied unless I had more. And he supported that. And he just said, do what you need to do. If this is what you want, we will do this. And I will keep the business. And you do what you need to do. Because he wanted me to be happy. It's a real gift, actually. I'm not going to cry again. But it is a real gift, and it's really special that somebody would recognise. Because for a while I did say, no, well, I'll stay with the business. I know it's, because he was very clear. He said, I will not go back and work for someone else. And I said, well, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm done. I need something different, and we need something different. So he was very much encouraged all the conversations, coached me through some of the conversations, helped me interview prep.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's the sort of thing he did, and he still does. When I come home, I have a coach and a mentor who helps me with a lot of stuff. But there'll be days where I'll come home and say, "I'm not sure I've got this." It's like, "You've got this. You've got it," and then he'll talk me through, and that's rare. That feels rare.
Yeah. And you've got 2 sons. Mm-hmm. There was a conversation that you had with one of them recently.
The dinner table conversation. Yeah, we have many dinner table conversations. There was a conversation about a situation I'd been in since leaving my own business. And it's a real transition when you've been your boss. And I freelanced before setting up the business. So really haven't worked for people for the best part of 25 years. And we sat down and I sort of relayed the story of what had happened. And my elder son would have been about 16-ish around that time. And I'm embarrassed to say I didn't really know much about mansplaining, but I sort of explained the situation, and he just looked at me and he leant into the table and he said, "Mum, you've been mansplained to." I was just like, "What? What's mansplaining?" So then he explained to me what it was. I was like, bloody hell. And it was that realisation that actually we had created this wonderful bubble, and actually the world outside hasn't really changed as much as I thought in my head that it had. But it was incredible that my kids were able to point it out. And that they understand what it is, because then I feel that Nigel and I have done an okay job where those boys are concerned, because hopefully it's a massive responsibility having boys, and I think a lot of people forget. Actually, I have friends with girlfriends who have daughters, and they all say it's a nightmare having a daughter. And I just think if the boy messes up, then we haven't done a good job, actually. So yeah, I felt quite proud at the fact, after it was all explained to me, somebody who hadn't got a clue. I felt quite proud.
So now you know what mansplaining is.
Yeah.
Looking back over the last 25 years, have you been mansplained to a few times?
Quite a few times. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And it's rife these days. Yeah.
Still rife.
Yeah. More than I wish it were. You know, and what it does make me chuckle sometimes is now I've gone into a few meetings and people, I'm probably going to mansplain you, and I was like, and I just laugh because I think, so you know you're doing it. Don't do it. You know, I've been working over 25 years, nearly 30 years now. You know what? I've learned a couple of things, but I don't know. It's.
Why do you think there's still a need for it to happen?
The first thing that goes through my head is, I just think that so many people are so insecure. And I think it's kind of how it manifests sometimes.
That's interesting. Can you tell me more?
Well, I think when people do it to a person who clearly has experience, it must be coming from some place of insecurity and feeling of threat, I suppose. Because why else would you tell somebody what they clearly will know? It's in order to make yourself feel better, isn't it? Is my rationale.
So they're making sure that you know that they know.
Yeah. Yeah. I can only put it down to that.
Mm. So a little bit of bang in the chest.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Interesting.
And don't forget, this is my position and I am here and I have a place, you know. And it's got to be that. It's got to be a sense of feeling threatened.
And do you think that's because you're now in a big corporate?
Yeah, I mean, I sometimes wonder whether it was going on and I just didn't see it because I hadn't explained it and had the definition.
Your son hadn't explained it to you yet.
Yeah, that's naivety on my part. But yeah, I mean, I think it's actually probably out there more than I just was seeing it. I think that's the difference. I'm attuned to it now.
Yeah.
And I think that people treat you differently when you're the business owner, and there has been a slight shift in the way you're treated. Even if you're in a senior position, when it's your business, people will treat you differently.
Has that been difficult for you to
adapt to? At times. Yeah. And I think the thing I found hardest is when people don't understand the sacrifices you make as a small business owner. You know, we always made sure everybody else's salaries were paid first. Everybody else's mortgage was more important, you know.
Different mindset.
Yeah.
So if I was employing you as a ex-business owner,
yeah,
you know, I would think that you were a complete gift because you've got that mindset.
No, and my boss does, I think. Yeah, I'm absolutely certain of that. But I think I don't think everybody sees everything the same way. And rightly so. You know, we don't live in a world of one colour.
Yeah. With your own business, you picked up, you know, a few awards and things. What do those accolades mean to you?
They were huge. That was one of our objectives, actually. So when we set up, we wanted peer recognition. It sounds silly at one level, you know, but it was really important to us at the time that people could see the value in the work that we were doing, because the ethos of great design for people, for the whole emotional being, was so unusual. To get those awards just felt like people were seeing more than the big practice for a start off, and more than just the superficial side of what we can do. You know, it's finishes and it's fixtures and it's space and light, but there's heart and soul in it as well, and there's emotion in it. And I think the fact that that got recognised was really important. Yeah, I'm hugely proud of those awards.
You should be. So how is it leading a team now?
Well, I don't strictly lead a team, and I have to say, I'm loving that. So I will lead a team on each project. So it's multiple small teams, but I'm not a team leader.
Okay.
And it's project by project. So it's a different way of having. I've had to really again adapt my way of thinking, but I think I've really enjoyed the new challenges that I've got. I'm enjoying the role that I'm in, and I'm enjoying. It's a completely different way of thinking and approaching the job, and that's really interesting. So I still feel like I'm learning loads, and for me that was a big part of this. I get to be doing multiple projects with multiple teams, and you see all the different ways that the young designers are working, and that I really enjoy that, because you see all the differences in the thought process, and you get to sort of have a little bit of a 10 pence worth on all of those different things. But I'm also seeing the construction side from a different angle, not from lead architect only. So I still get to do that, but I get to see it inside as well, and that's fascinating. So so I feel like I'm learning tons at the moment. So it's exhausting, and I've learned to choose my battles as I've gotten older. I think I was in my younger years, I fought every battle. Everything was a battle, and everyone was.
So you took on every battle,
yeah,
you mean?
I did.
Or there were lots of battles?
Both.
Okay.
Both. But I was absolutely not the person to go, do you know what, it's not worth it.
Can you give me an example of some of those battles?
Oh, I don't know. I'm trying to think. I mean, no, I can't. I can't even think of them. But I do remember. I would get into an argument about anything if I felt it was wrong. Whereas now I've also learnt that sometimes let people be wrong. Actually, it's really not worth it. But I think that's youth. I see it in my kids, and I feel, go on, explore, find out. I think it's healthy. I perhaps took it a little bit too far sometimes.
So now you a bit more pick your arguments.
Yeah.
A little bit. Pick your battles. Okay.
Yeah.
So as a thought leader in workplace design and well-being, what do you see the role of interior architecture? How do you see it evolving?
Evolving on, because it's changed so much since I started. I'm going to tell everybody that I started at JAC. My career in workplace, that's where I started back in the day. And which is phenomenal to be sat here with you you now own it. It's just it's a head spin. It's fantastic.
A little bit,
yeah.
And we don't do design anymore.
No, absolutely. No, indeed.
Well, if we did, I wouldn't be allowed to talk to you, would I?
No.
So,
I can talk to anybody. Of course you can. No, I mean, it's changed massively since then. When I came into workplace design, it was the least desirable industry. In a design perspective, nobody wanted to do it. It was really hard to recruit into it.
Why?
Because it was really boring.
Because it was
desks and it was screens and it was mostly furniture solutions, and nobody really did very much. The whole focus back then was retail, hospitality. Nigel Coates was huge. I followed him around like people followed the Beatles. I was just on his trail everywhere he went. I can remember hanging outside Jigsaw in Knightsbridge because I wanted to stand next to the copper sculpture. It's like, what are you doing? But that's what it was back then. But I think it's actually a really exciting profession now. It's opened up and it's become incredibly broad because it's recognised the true person, the whole person, and I think when it was just bums on seats and it was Taylorism, effectively, it wasn't an interesting job. Whereas now we recognise a whole human being, that they are emotional as well as physical. And so we are thinking about their health and well-being. And I think, I was working from home before COVID, always have done. And I think the way it will move forward is only to continue to redress what human beings need. And they do need flexibility. And I know there's been trials for the 4-day week. I'm still waiting to see how that pans out, because I think that's really interesting. I think there's not a single person at our industry level, I'm not saying across all industries, where you work a phenomenal number of hours. There's no such thing as a 9-to-5 job, and it's not 5 days a week. So I think I'm interested to see what evolves in terms of working patterns and the way people will force that change, because I think it will come. And I still am a believer that our cities are yet to change more. And I'm hoping I'll be, working to be a part of that, because I find that really exciting. I'm absolutely besotted with the idea of what our cities could turn into, and how we will live and work and educate and be almost all in that sort of whole cityscape. I think we will be redefining our urban existence, but I think not for me, and I am a bit of an advocate of this, not at the expense of losing all our lung space. We need our lungs in our bodies. Why wouldn't we on the planet? So it has to be a balance, and I think there's a real waste. Got me on my soapbox now. I think there's a real waste of brownfield sites and existing buildings that we're just not using properly. So we've got to start adapting the buildings we've got, and using them better.
What trends do you think will define the future of the workplace?
Well, I think some of what I've mentioned there, because I think we will live and work differently. So I think that will be beyond a trend, because a trend can have a short shelf life. And I think it will evolve and morph into something far more attuned to the way our kids want to live, for a start off. I don't have a single conversation at home where my children say, I'm aspiring to what you have. They think I work too much. They think that I don't have a quality of life because I work more than I do other things. Mm-hmm. So that the next generation are going to push for something different. And I think our city and our urban life will, or our cityscape will change to suit.
That's really interesting. You're quite active in industry discussions, and I know you've done some panels.
Yeah.
If you could pick a topic to talk about on a panel, what would it be?
But I think the topic that's running around for me a lot at the moment, I know I've got quite a presence on sustainability, and I am passionate about sustaining life on this planet. But I think that the subject I've just touched on evolving cities, but in context with the young people coming through, I think is where my head is at, because I think we've got, it's my view, but I think we've got a real shortfall of people coming through for corporate real estate. I think it's not terribly attractive for a large part. There's sections of it that are. But on the whole, there's a lot of jobs in corporate real estate, and a lot of avenues. And I think that people don't know about them. And we need kids to be excited about it. And at the moment, I don't think that exists.
Why aren't they attractive?
I don't think anybody knows about it.
Okay. So it's awareness rather than...
Yeah. And then we can find out, if we raise awareness, then we can see how excited they are. But I just don't even think kids are even aware. I was chatting to my nephew who's just gone on to a graduate scheme, and I listed all the things that we do in-house as a business. And he had no idea that an architectural practice also does brand graphics and environmental graphics and, data analytics and, as well as architecture and design.
Yeah.
It's broad, or that you could be a surveyor, or that you could be a project manager. They're not, it's just not talked about enough. Everybody talks about the legal profession and finance and going to work in the city, but we have a creative industry that has a whole bolt-on set of skill sets.
Yeah. So we need to get that into school level, you think?
I think so. So I think if I was going to talk about anything, it would be that and trying to contextualise that with the built environment, because I do love the built environment.
Amazing. So as you know, this podcast is called Places She Shapes. So I've got some shaping moment questions to ask you. So the first one is, what's one tool, resource or item that you must have in your workspace that allows you to do your best work?
A pen, I think. I always have a pen in my
Okay.
hand.
Looking back, is there a place, a room, a building or a city where you found your voice or realised your potential as a leader, even if you didn't fully recognise it at the time?
I don't know. I think there was a point when I was working with Caroline, who handled our PR, Caroline Collette, who's phenomenal. And she took me out of my comfort zone and put me on stage first at the NEC. And I've never sweated so much in my life. And it was just it was a signage and graphics event. And I was talking at that. Mm. And that led on to a couple of other things. But the bit that I think really changed the way I thought about myself was when I was there's two events that I got involved in over COVID. And I think COVID was quite transformative for me, actually. Even though I'd been in a leadership role before that, I did a panel discussion. I was asked to do a panel discussion through an Indian magazine. And I was the only female based in the UK, and everybody else was a male Indian guy, all based in India. And it was all online. Yeah. And I remember being really quite worried because when we'd done the pre-talk, I was the only female. And I came off that discussion and I'd answered my questions so perfectly to the point where I was able to challenge somebody about, and I get, when you say this out loud, you just think, oh my God. But, we had a conversation about air conditioning and I put him right. And I thought, gee, if you can do that and you can have a conversation about air conditioning on a panel discussion, there's nothing that can stop you, and I think that really changed the way I thought about myself and the way I put myself out there. Because I think leadership is also as much about the way you think about yourself. And then when I was quite soon after that invited to moderate a panel organised by the Swedish Embassy, and it was all academics. And I remember sending it back saying, I think you've got the wrong person. They were like, no, it's you. We want to do this. And when I did that and we came through that, I just thought, give yourself a break. And I think those moments in my life made me see myself differently. Whether I'd been leading or not at that point, I don't think I'd recognised myself in that way. And I think that was quite a major moment.
So two really interesting points there. One is that this is all in the last 5 years.
Yeah.
So fairly recently.
Yeah.
And the other reason is that you went back and went, are you sure I'm the right
Yeah.
Have you got the right person?
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I was like, can't be me. They must. And Nigel said to me, there aren't many Gurvinder Khuranas in the world, because obviously that's who they'd written to. They're my marital name.
Yeah.
I work under my maiden name, and And I was like, maybe this might be a point. Okay. I suppose there aren't many of those. So
there was a little bit of imposter syndrome there?
Yeah. I challenge anybody to say that they don't have that from time to time.
So I've got a 7-year-old. On my job list is organise 7-year-old's 8th birthday party.
Wow.
He has a changing job title, changes from fireman to whatever, singer, whatever's going on.
Yeah.
What would your job title have been when you were 7 or 8, and how does it connect to the woman that you are today?
I wanted to be a ballerina.
Did you?
I did. I wanted to do ballet. I didn't dance.
Okay.
I just really liked the shoes.
Yes.
There's a shoe thing here.
There's a shoe thing.
And I just really loved the idea of it. And it just all looked so beautiful and graceful and special. I was the 7-year-old who managed to get a new coat, stand by the fire, this is 1970s, and burn my coat, and then still have to wear it because we didn't have the money to replace it. So ballet shoes and a little tutu would have been the dream at that point. In terms of how it's affected me now, I still love the ballet. And, that was my 40th birthday present from my husband. So we went to the ballet. It was gorgeous. And I still like to dance. I don't do ballet at all, but I do like to dance.
But you're still involved in the aesthetics of the space. It's not just the shoes.
No. And I do. I love set design. I did contemplate set design for a while. I just think the theatrical element of it, it's so fun. And I do enjoy all of that still. That's still very much a part of... I can be quite theatrical when I put my mind to it. I can be quite silly and quite playful but there's a real beauty to it as well. There's a real opulent aesthetic to a lot of the sets that you see in some of the big productions, and I think that's still a big part of me. Yeah, very much so. But I love that whole thing. I mean, I also wanted to be a playback singer. So I wanted to go to India, go to Bollywood and sing. That's what the other thing I wanted to do.
Amazing. We're at Abbey Road. You can...
Well.
It's never too late. Brilliant. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. It's been fun.
Okay, let's take it from the top.